Kingdoms rise and empires crumble, and the knowledge and wisdom from past ages are lost to the foggy ruins of time. But for genuine seekers of truth, one place stands alone on a hill. Shining brightly in the darkness, you, dear listener, have reached the Hidden Citadel.
Hey, welcome
You found
to
us.
the Hidden Citadel.
Yes,
We are here to talk about one of our favorite topics.
completely.
We're going to have to get into our book. Nearly, and I almost died when I did the math, nearly 20 years ago, Greg and I published a book. Actually, we started writing the book. I don't think it got published exactly 20 years ago, but
No.
it's getting real darn close. We started writing a book called that ended up being called T.O.B., which had many. It was going to be called Toys in Babylon.
I still have the picture you made. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And
I'll show you.
Oh great. And then it became the Tower of Babel, and then it was something else. Oh, there it is. That's the original one.
Yeah.
That was going to be the book cover, but then it got changed. And there's actually two covers available on Amazon, so if you look for it, you're going to find one cover that is actually, the original one that got released, and then there was an updated one. In this book, we kind of riff off of C.S. Lewis's idea that he started in the I think it was called the Dark Tower, which was supposed to be the fourth Out of the Silent Planet book, the fourth Ransom book, that he died and he didn't get to finish. And there's this one scene where this guy with a stinger in his head is stinging people, and we were like, dude, what if that was Nimrod and it was his crown? And so that became kind of the gist, the MacGuffin of the book.
Yep.
Here's the thing. In our research, and I don't remember how we came to the conclusion, but we basically equated Nimrod with Enmerkar, which was a great ancient Sumerian king. And I found... did I send you this guy, Let Us Reason, and his videos?
I think so.
Dude, this guy, I'm sad that he's a pre-tribber, but other than that, this guy is amazing about what the research that he did. And I was like, dude, I was convinced that Nimrod was Enmerkar 20 years ago, but this guy went through and just gave me even way more things to think about and connect Nimrod to Enmerkar. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the building of the Tower of Babel and all these other monuments that were found around the world. We're gonna talk about Nimrod's wife, who some call Semiramis. We're gonna get into and the building of all the fake religions and everything that came, false religions that came out of that. And we might even address a little bit of Gary Wayne's madness and his hatred towards Tolkien and Lewis. A little bit.
We have a large mountain to cover. Yeah.
Because today I published... So yesterday I sat and I listened while I was working to probably 6 hours of Gary Wayne. I just put it on in the background and got to work. And one of the things that drove me nuts... I really like Gary Wayne. There's a couple things that I slightly disagree with on. I think that Gary Wayne does a little bit of mixing up, like conflation of some things.
Yeah.
But not too bad. But I really don't agree with him on his idea of soul sleep, and he really fleshed that out with Taylor Welsh. On a previous episode, we talked about something that that I thought he was referring to when he mentioned soul sleep, but on this most recent episode with Taylor Welsh, he explained it more, and I was like, oh no, he's totally off base, because he's not taking... And in the same conversation that he explains soul sleep, he turns around and he talks about the martyred people who are complaining to Jesus at the throne. And I'm like, wait a minute, if they're sleeping, then they couldn't have been complaining to Jesus around the throne. So it's like his whole argument about that falls apart, and he doesn't seem to get the thing. Well, Taylor asked him about C.S. Lewis, and he was like, but what do you say about the screw tape letters, and what do you say about this and about that? And his comment was, well, they never repent. If they ever did become Christians, they never repented of their Rosicrucian connections. So I published an article today there, and you can go check it out at WordPress for, what is our blog? Hang on. You can go to the Hidden Citadel 4 at WordPress.com, and you can read the article. There is no connection at all with Lewis and Tolkien ever having been a part of the Rosicrucians.
I don't get that either.
And if you read Charles Williams' book, The Greater Trumps, in the very intro, he talks about how Lewis and Tolkien converted him to Christianity and how they worked on him for years.
Yeah.
And then finally he turned his life around and started following Christ. And it's like, so the very guy that Gary Wayne points to connect Tolkien and Lewis, and what drives me nuts is he always says the Inkling Society, and the Inkling Society is a hidden arm of the Rosicrucians, and it's like, no, it wasn't. It was like their D&D group. You know, it's like, it was not a society. They didn't even call it the Inkling Society. It was just the Inklings, and it was just the guys that met for a pint at the pub on a Friday night. You know,
the interesting thing is, what bothers me here is when you try to investigate the intentions of something based on what you assume, presume, or discriminate as someone's psychology, but you ignore their fruit, then you're eliminated from the science of psychology, because the science of psychology is very much like the biblical model, which is you can only measure something by what it does, what it consistently produces. So you look at the works, the devotion, how about the values of Tolkien and Lewis. Lewis has some of the greatest Christian quotes you could possibly have from a Christian
I'm a
author.
Christian today because of C.S. Lewis.
So you're looking at
Mere Christianity changed my life.
But so you have that, you have like screw tape letters and Christianity just going across, like you look at like Lee Strobel or what's his name, the other guy, and it's like not McDonald, something like that. It's he was that attorney. Josh McDowell. Like you have those guys, and you have like, all right, and you're like, no, despite them having consistent fruit, I know that they're
and the thing is, it's like a lot of so this is what happened. I didn't write about this in the article, but I should have. In the 80s, there was a big move to kind of discredit C.S. Lewis based on the fact that the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe had a witch in it, and magic and stuff like that. And so there were some. But the same people that were against that were also against Star Wars and were against. Yeah. Oh, you mean the Endor in the Bible? Yeah, there's a witch in the Bible.
Yeah.
Anyway,
several.
But the point was, there was a group of people that went around and they were basically saying this is bad fantasy. Hank Hanegraaff, as weird as he kind of got later on, did an excellent job back in the 90s setting up the difference between bad fantasy and good fantasy. And I'm sure in the CRI archives you can go and listen to all of that stuff from back then. Here's the thing. C.S. Lewis, I want to address a couple things. The eucatastrophe that Lewis and that Tolkien talked about is this idea, and Gary connects it to myth, and it's the idea that in mythology there's a happy ending. And both Lewis and Tolkien said that they believed that God allowed that to live in mythology so that those cultures would recognize the gospel when it was presented to them, and then they would convert to Christianity. That's the whole point of this eucatastrophe thing. And it's like, the problem is, anybody that's a Lewis scholar or a Tolkien scholar would tear Gary Wayne apart in 5 minutes if they just sat down and talked. But what got me is Taylor Welch and his buddy were just sitting there drooling over what a genius Gary is. And it's like, Gary's not an idiot, but he's so far off on this that it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's just, it needed to be addressed.
And it really bothers me because on there's two accounts, and you know, it's really the parable principle here, that they are using a different kind of story in order to depict very biblical ideas. And you know, their fantasy is really, you can see the intention is to God, like, and to Christ. That's it. So, but the thing that I think is just psychologically, how Gollum becomes Gollum, and how that's so detailed in what starts with an inkling that no pun intended, an inclination. What starts with an inclination, and it turns into relative deprivation, which turns into like Cain and Abel murder.
That's exactly how sin works.
And then makes it so he's almost immortally established because of sin. Like, he's constantly in torment. Gollum is, because of this
like
thing.
Addiction.
Like
it's a total
exactly.
picture of
There's addiction. There's paranoia. It's almost a schizophrenia of sorts, not because there's dual, because that's not what schizophrenia is.
Right.
But it is the way he's hearing voices. There's other factors getting him to do other things. So you have that. But then you had Edmund in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
With the Turkish Delight.
Same story.
It is, and it's very much
something very simple caused him to betray his friends.
And it became something that was offered to him by something that was supernatural, and he took it and then betrayed the fellowship. Betrayed the fellowship.
The fellowship.
That is, I mean, you look at that. You look at it's similar. They're both extensions of the Eden experience, Eden episode.
Well, and the other thing too is, I want to address another thing. Gary Wayne talked about how Lewis's name traces back to the Welsh Llewellyn. It doesn't. Llewellyn is a Welsh name, and they're a Welsh royal family. C.S. Lewis was Irish, and it goes back to Llw. Well, I think it does, which is the Irish name that is not related. Even though they're similar, they're not related.
Yeah.
The other thing about Tolkien and Lewis both being these from wealthy upper crust, you know, Tolkien was an orphan. He didn't even know who his parents were, and he was raised by a Catholic priest.
Yeah.
And the reason he got into Oxford was because the priest had to talk and show, look, this kid's really smart, and you should give him an opportunity, and so they let him in. And he spent his entire life as a teacher. You know, and then same thing with Lewis. It was like almost the reason he was at Oxford was because they had something kind of like the GI Bill after World War I, and he was able to test in and be able. But neither one of them came from wealthy backgrounds or families, and in fact, Lewis's grandfather was the Irish version of the Anglicans, a pastor. It was like he came from a Christian background, even though he rejected it early. And so what they do is they take quotes from Tolkien, or not Tolkien, but from Lewis, before he was a Christian, when he was an atheist.
Yeah.
And then they bring those back up and they use them against him. And it's like, dude, if people talked about some of the stupid things I said before God got a hold of me, I'd hate to have that thrown back in my face. You know?
It absolutely makes no sense.
Now, why did we bring this up? Because it actually does have some bearing on what we're talking about.
Yes.
The mythologies of the world, you can pretty much date them all back to, I don't want to say a trinity, but we're just going to use that because there's no better word. But there's a trinity concept that pervades every culture of the world. In Christianity, it's different. It's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But in the rest of every mythology and every religion on earth, including the New Age stuff, there is this concept of the father, the mother, and the child.
Right.
Okay, and that traces all the way back to one person that came after the flood, and that was Nimrod.
Yeah.
And Nimrod's wife, some people call her Semiramis. There are actually a couple different Semiramises that were in history, but the Nimrod version of Semiramis is older, and that may or may not have actually been her name. Enmerkar's wife was called Enmerkar-Z, which basically means Enmerkar's wife. So they didn't even name her.
Sounds like a Mazda, Enmerkar-Z.
Yeah, right. Well, Mazda is interesting too, because Mazda is one of the chariot of the gods in Zoroastrianism, and Zoroastrianism is directly related to what we're talking about today too.
Okay.
But that's kind of a tangent. So interesting that you said that. But here's the thing with but I think Enmerkar's wife was probably named Inanna, and that's because the very first mother goddess that is mentioned is Inanna, and so he basically elevated himself and his wife to be gods and wanted people to worship them. And then they started building the Tower of Babel. And I wanted to show you this guy. This guy's website is called Let Us Reason, and he talks about these points of similarity. Greg can't see this, but I'll read it off for those of you who can see it. The points of similarity is both. Well, first of all, I guess I got to show you the time. Well, that's not it. That's the time of when. If you go by the Septuagint dates, you will see that if you go by the Masoretic text, they basically put the flood at about 2300 BC or 2350 BC. The building of the Tower of Babel at 2200 BC. The building of the pyramid is sometime before, apparently, the tower, but I think the pyramid was built way before that, but some of the modern people will put it there. But when you go by the dating that's actually in the Septuagint, it pushes it back, and so it basically makes the Tower of Babel happen at 3100 BC and the flood at about 3400 BC, which they say between 4000 and 3100 BC, somewhere in there, is when the Uruk period of Babylon started, which is like the non-mythical Babylonian part of the empire. And so basically what happens is we have okay, we're gonna pause it for a second. All right, so basically if we go by the Septuagint dates, then Enmerkar and Nimrod, they line up. So they both lived in the 3000s BC during the Uruk period after the Great Flood. They both built cities in Shinar or Sumer after the flood. They were both Sumerian kings credited with building Erech or Uruk. They both rebelled against God. They both introduced pagan worship of false gods, number one, himself and his wife and his kid. They built massive buildings. So the Tower of Babel and the Eridu Ziggurat, or the Enki temple complex, basically was the Tower of Babel. They used the same construction techniques. They baked mud brick with bitumen. And here's the thing, nobody else did this before them. And the Bible points out that, yeah, they're kind of the first, or Nimrod's time when they were building the tower was the first time that type of construction was used.
We'll come back to that too. Yeah,
both of their building sites were abruptly abandoned, and nobody knows why they stopped. Both were credited with or lived contemporaneously with the invention of writing. So before them, there was no writing. But after them, there was writing, and the question is, well, why did they need writing? Okay?
To understand
languages,
Right.
Both are renowned as being hunters. So here's what the word Enmerkar means. Inmer is a name, and Kar means hunter. So both
name of the hunter.
languages, yeah, both. Check this out. You're gonna love this. If you take the D off of Nimrod,
Yeah.
okay, and you read it in Hebrew, it's spelled N-M-R because
Yeah.
there are no vowels in Hebrew. If you take the vowels out of Inmerkar and take the car off because that means the hunter, then you get N-M-R. So what the Bible did is they took Inmer, which was his name,
Yeah.
added a D in NIIMROD,
Yeah.
and basically made the rebel
NIIMROD.
out of
Wow.
Inmerkar rather than Inmer the hunter. And so it's such a slam dunk. And some people like to say Sargon was in Nimrod, but Sargon lived in a completely different time period. There's no way he could have been Nimrod. The other thing too is Inmerkar had a wife that he deified. So did Nimrod. They had a son that they deified. And so around the world, you have Osiris and Isis and their son Horus in Egypt. You have Aphrodite. You have Ashtaroth. You have all these female goddesses are connected to Astarte. They're all connected to her. Orion, like I said, Osiris, a Baal. A lot of these different gods are connected to Nimrod.
Yeah.
Okay? And now the last little beautiful thing is he connects, I don't know if you got to see this video, but he connects the Scorpion King, King Scorpion, with Nimrod too.
Wow.
So after the Tower of Babel, Sumerians went and invaded into Egypt. And the funny thing was, too, Nimrod's father was Cush. And Cush is said to have gone and left the Mesopotamian area and settled Cush, okay?
Yeah.
Well, Inmerkar's father also left and basically went to somewhere overseas and settled a nation. Well, after they were kicked out of the Tower of Babel incident, guess where Nimrod goes? Goes right to where Cush was at, and then he takes over Egypt, and he basically builds the what became the Egyptian empire. And they know that King Scorpion was the first pharaoh, basically, of Egypt to unite the upper and lower Egypt. And,
wow.
And so it's like, and also all the cities that Immerkar was said to have founded, they're all the same cities that Nimrod was said to have founded. It's like, and then there's a whole Immerkar and the king of Arada where he's arguing back and forth with somebody that's like a Noah figure wanting the clothing. And we talked about this in another episode about Adam and Eve's clothes.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, it's like, to me, a slam dunk.
Is it so strange with the conquerors that just conquerors, they start off, when they start off, they go with whatever their might is, whether it's strategy, whether it's numbers, whether it's weaponry. And at some point, they realize they don't have enough. And this is just like, this is, this goes back to against the Eden thing. If you have everything you need, no, I don't have enough. So then you start grafting in supernatural ideas, which actually subtracts from what your initial either gift is or your success is or your strategy is, right? So I mean, if Adam and Eve have everything and then they grafted in evil, now they have a subtraction. When you look at all the conquerors, they all seem to do the same thing. Alexander the Great, Hitler, he conquered and then realized I need something more. So then he was pursuing all these supernatural artifacts and stuff to try to give himself extra power, and it actually took away from his.
You can't control the whole world.
Yeah.
It's not possible. And if that's your goal, to control the whole world, how are you going to do it except with supernatural power? Yeah. And so that's probably the conclusion that Nimrod came to.
Well, let's look at that for a second, because if you got to almost reverse engineer here, because if you have man, and man is just occupying Earth, and then you have these supernatural watcher beings come in and say, guess what? We will show you how to use Earth, because we've been given instruction on how the Earth can be understood, subjugated. And used, and not only just fire, but like the Promethean kind of thing, all those kinds of things. We were given that that instruction to give you, but now we're using it the wrong way, and so now we're going to give that to you. So it would make sense that if that's a part of not our DNA but our behavioral, when we want to come back to this too, but our behavioral tendency to accept supernatural, then eventually, when even if we're not accepting supernatural in our conquest or whatever we're doing, eventually it's going to come back to we're going to reach a 0 point and need supernatural again, and that's what seems like it happened with the Hitler. But the thing that you and I have been talking about recently, which I'm just looking at things logically and kind of behaviorally. The thing is, when you had the Babel thing, the one thing I disagree with, I think it was it cosmic haunted cosmic, I don't know what it was, but the guys they were talking about the probabilities of what Babel was, and that it wasn't a tower, but it was more of a. But the problem with that I see is the Bible's actually lists it as the tower, like that.
It does.
And by the way, like the tower itself is really important because it's a false mountain, and that's important because it's also important to say that we have created our own mountain with our own hands, because God created mountains. But they're saying, I'm going to create my own mountain, and it had never been done before. And there had been no other languages before. Well, and then, not other language, but I almost feel like...
Unless this guy's right, and they're trying to recreate what was before the flood. So, like, if there were structures at nexus points around the Earth... that somehow was some sort of a power grid... then maybe he was like, we're not doing it the way, we're going back to how it was before the flood, and we're going to reestablish this, because a lot of the cities where Nimrod went, they think that there are structures that predate Nimrod's time that were somehow buried. And it's like, okay, so he was digging back up what was before.
And I agree with that. But here's if you are trained to do something, and that's just like you can. It's almost the guy. Remember the guy, the Chariots of Fire guy? He was like extremely fast, and they're like, "Why do you run?" And he goes, "Because God made me. He made me do the ability to run, so I'm going to do it." Okay. Or you ever hear that story of the guy?
Why do we do the Hidden Citadel?
Because this is what we can do. You pointed out one time. You and I were talking about this kind of thing. You're like, "We ought to be recording this because we do it so often." But there's this police officer who went through the police academy, and I forgot his name. It's like I forgot, Frank something, but he went through the police academy, and they trained him with such precision how to disengage a weapon from a gun from a guy's hand, and he was doing it so fast. He's one of the fastest guys to do it.
Oh, I've seen that guy.
Okay, so he took the gun. Yeah, the problem is, he got to the point where he could take the gun out and hand it back to the guys to do it again. Took the gun out, handed it back to the trainer, do it again. Then we got live with somebody.
Oh no!
He took it out of the hand, gave it back to the guy.
And gave it back to him.
And then he had to get it free again because he was so trained to do something at such a high level that he could do nothing else except that. Okay, so what my thing here is, if there was supernatural instruction to these people of how to supernaturally create a mountain such that got God's attention, that when they were dispersed to the Aztecs, to the Mayans, to India, to all these places that suddenly Graham Hancock and Tucker and Randall Carlson are finding, they're unearthing. You're like, look at these structures, and they're all apparently supernaturally made. My favorite thing is when they're discussing Egypt, and they're saying the precision of like the pyramids, and then he said, when you look at the things that the Egyptians actually made, they're just mountains of just rocks. It's just it's poor.
They're not
like
the same not the same at all.
But if you're all working as one, this is what you've been conditioned and trained and instructed to do, and then all of a sudden you're dispersed. The location that you go to next, what do you think you're going to do?
You're going to try to do it again.
You're going to try to do it again.
Yeah. And that's why they started building pyramids in Egypt. I really feel like if you look at the NIIMROD's place, the inky structure that he tried to build.
Yeah.
What you see is it took him 5 or 6 times to finally get the idea down of what he wanted to build. So I don't know that he really knew what he was doing yet.
Let me know
I
when.
also want to turn my AC off. There we go.
Are we still okay?
We're still rolling, yeah.
Back on.
All right. So cut.
Yeah. So the thing that's just really interesting there is that, first of all, there's so much mystery as to how man and even time can account for the precision, the magnitude, and and all. What's funny is it's almost like neurology. When we look, the more we look at neurology, the more that we kind of like are just trying to understand what's already there and working. And it's like, wow, like how is that possible? That kind of thing. And so the more that the pyramids and those structures are understood, the more you feel like you like, how would they be put in place? How is that even possible by way of human understanding?
Don't have the possibility.
So it seems like that the it has to be supernatural. It has to have supernatural components to it, as well as it also has to, like I said before, accounting for man's possibility and time. So it's like both of those have to do with mortality. But if you take mortality out of it, you have something that appears to be, like Gary Wayne points out. He's like, all right, there's always a duplicate. Well, you had God's.
See, we do love Gary.
Yeah, we do. you have, and plus his name means Indiana.
I know.
Gary, Indiana, Fort Wayne.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So, and you're Indiana.
And Gary's close to where you're from, and Fort Wayne's close to where I'm from.
Yeah. So it's like when you have, but if you have those kind of those, when you're looking at it and going, wow, the more that you look at this, the more that you realize this is almost supernaturally made. But why is it supernaturally made? Well, you had the earth, and you had its foundations, its mountains. It's not only where Eden is considered a mountain. All right, let's make other Edens. So it's just, you always have the duplicate,
and it's where God came with man, and it's kind of like the Gilgamesh thing is interesting. Gilgamesh decided he was going to go to heaven and fight against the ones who sent the flood, so that they would never send a flood again. I don't know. I mean, the ancients, I think they have Gilgamesh being Enmerkar's grandfather.
Yeah.
If I remember right. But it's still the concept of, and if you think about it, if Gilgamesh equated with the grandfather of Enmerkar, and Canaan is the grandfather of Nimrod, then it's like, well, Canaan was cursed.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. God told Noah, spread out and repopulate the earth, right?
Yeah.
So his other 2 sons were probably obedient, and they did spread out and start building up new populations in different spots of the earth. But the first thing that Nimrod wanted to do was bring everybody back together and build this unified structure, and that's part of why, like, if you're going to have a massive undertaking where you're planning on building something, and who knows, here's the thing, like we talked about before when we talked about the pyramids, we don't know what's underneath the pyramid. Maybe it is a giant obelisk.
Yeah.
What the new ground penetrating studies have shown. Okay, what if the ziggurat structure was really just the first part of what they intended to build? And so it wasn't like they were saying this ziggurat is what we're going to end up with. It's just that's what they ended up with in that culture, because that's as far as they got. And this same thing, it looks like the same kind of structures from the Mayans and the Aztecs and things like that. It's like, maybe they're copying, everybody could just be copying the pyramid, but not really, getting close to it. But the Egyptians were right there and they could look at it. But the funny thing is, it's like you said, if the Scorpion King, guess what the Scorpion King's name is?
I don't know.
NIIMROD.
Narmer?
Again, take the vowels out and you get NRMR.
Wow.
If you take the AR out because of the way New Yorkers add an R to the end of words sometimes, if that was something that happened back then too with the ah sound, then you would not have an R, you would just have NMR again.
Wow.
So you got the Scorpion King's name is Enmer or Narmer, the Ninus, who became a god. I mean, there's all these different gods of the Mediterranean that are similar in etymology to NIIMROD, to the NMR thing. And you'll see their names will have that in there somehow. Or instead of having a name, the name of the god will basically mean the Lord or the ruler or the master.
Overseer.
Like the Baal.
Well, but I mean, and the conqueror of the world, or that's the prince of the power of the air. There's always this conquering thing. Isn't it's really funny because it's almost still the opposition to heaven. But the thing that you and I talked about a little bit was you had the Noahic flood, right? And at the end of the flood is, I will not conquer this. I will not once again flood the earth. But we know that it's going to be fire. Okay, and it's not like the the supernatural spirits of the world are ignorant to that.
No,
that whole
know.
thing. So they know. So when they're saying, well, they wanted to make these towers to avoid the flood, another flood, that doesn't make any sense. What does make sense is for these bricks and things to be supernaturally made in order to be almost fire repellent or fire.
There you go.
That makes a lot more
heated brick.
Heated brick. You can't. If it was created
they were
fire,
already in the fire.
Created by fire is going to repel the fire.
Exactly.
Like it's not. Fire's not going to be able to. I mean, once it's almost like an inoculation. Once if you're inoculated against something, you are.
That's the thing that hit me this week as I was studying this is the Sumerians invented allegedly pottery.
Yeah.
And then their bricks were pottery.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, they're bricks? It never dawned on me when I read that in the Bible that they were basically making pots and bricks out of the same ovens.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's like, it's totally... But I want to talk about NIIMROD again, the Scorpion King idea.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the Egyptian hieroglyph where it has the intertwining thing that guess where that came from? NIIMROD's mace.
Wow.
So those brontosaurus-looking creatures that are on the hieroglyph, that comes from the Scorpion King's mace, the head of his mace.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, wait a minute. I mean, that looks like a brontosaurus almost. And it's like, if you got a guy that's... Also, we got to go back to the whole idea of NIIMROD became a Gibborim. He didn't start out as a Gibborim. We don't know anything about his wife. Maybe she was an angel that took on a feminine form that was fallen, for all we know.
Yeah.
Or maybe, his mother or father, somehow there was something that caused him to become Gibborim, to become a Nephilim. And it's like, well, how do you do that? How do you become a Nephilim? But then you just said something really interesting. You said Satan entered in, referring to Judas.
Yes.
And we talked about that in another episode, but what if Satan entered into, or maybe not Satan, maybe it was another fallen angel, but some angelic being entered into NIIMROD the same way that Satan entered into Judas.
Yeah.
And then that caused him to grow.
Well, theoretically, in biblical language, when you have... All right, and this is not to get graphic or anything, but like when they account the sons of God and the daughters of men, it appears to be a physical event that ends up with a birth of the men in renown or the Nephilim, right? But there's also many accounts of unclean spirits entering people who have allowed them
Yeah.
in. Not, and that's not unlike
Yep.
what would be occur physically.
Well, this afternoon I was going through. Sometimes I'll go and I'll put on some of our Hidden Citadel episodes that haven't had enough views, just so I can give it another view.
Yeah.
And I was listening to the demon possession episode today, and we talked about how demon possessed people often show increased strength and increased abilities that they wouldn't normally have in real life. And that's kind of how the question that we had gotten, I think it was from Declan, he had asked about how would you know between demon possession and a mental illness. And it's like, if you have a mental illness, you're not going to be suddenly supernaturally strong. You're not going to be speaking in some ancient dead language. You're not going to be climbing up a wall or levitating. However, if you have a demon acting on your body, an invisible creature that you can't see, you definitely would experience or could experience those things.
Let's explore that for a second, because can something supernatural conquer something supernatural? And the answer to that would yes. So when the disciples came to Jesus and said or what is the seven sons of Sceva, whatever it was, but we tried to conquer it, we got our butts kicked. What happened there? Now they were supernatural. Yep. They were supernaturally cleansed and and given the Spirit, but they didn't have the power to overcome the one that was more powerful. Right.
But check this out. You could say there's two other precedents. When Michael fought against Satan over Moses' body,
yep,
one was more powerful than the other. Michael won.
Yeah.
When Gabriel fought against the Prince of Persia, and then Michael had to come and help him, and they overpowered. So yes, that's three spots in the Bible where we see that can happen.
But okay, there's also something in psychology, and it's really about conformity and really about subjugation. It has to do with informational influence. All right, the little girl who is demon possessed, who is causing everybody else to become wealthy, had an influence of essentially conquering and becoming manipulative of all these, because they went to her. But it's just like the Faust idea, or the Faustus idea. They were not in control of her. She, in fact, was making them what they were. Them. They never control the supernatural when you're mortal. You only are deceived into thinking that you're a part of it's all. And again, this goes back to Gary Wayne. What does the Apostle Paul say that we do as we grow in the Spirit? We become a part of the divine nature, right? In this case, they are thinking they're becoming a part of the supernatural nature. The supernatural nature, in this case, because it's evil and not God, is that evil duplication or that replication that's causing them to be deceived rather than empowered.
Yep, that's true. Well, and the thing is, whatever it was with Nimrod, obviously he didn't give up. I mean, if this connection between Enmerkar, Nimrod, Narmer, and Ninus, and some of these other rulers that lived in the 3000 BC era, that were all major builders, and they kept trying to build over and over and over again. It's like, what was it that he had got it into his head? I am going to build, my own empire rather than let God have his empire. So much so that he even came up with the idea, or I say co-opted. He co-opted the idea of the dying and resurrecting God. Because apparently with Semiramis, whenever Nimrod died, the thinking is that she claimed to have had a child, which is this Tammuz, and that a sunbeam impregnated her, and then she gave birth to Nimrod again.
Yeah.
And Tammuz was the reincarnation of Nimrod. So the concept of reincarnation comes from Semiramis. The concept of being impregnated by a virgin they co-opted to use, for her own thing. Yeah. The idea of dying and resurrecting a god, like with the Osiris myth, came from that. And it's like all of this was stuff that they came up with. And here's the thing. they had to have come up with this before they died. Because
Yeah.
this was the doctrine that they created
Mm-hmm.
to give to their followers. And so they were basically saying, this is what's going to happen. So that means that it didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
He didn't really die and resurrect. She didn't really get impregnated by a sunbeam and all this stuff. But what that means is they knew that there was a prophecy
Yep.
about this stuff coming, and they were like, well, how are we going to supplant this? And we're going to come up with our own version of it, so that way it'll spread out to the rest of the world.
But if you come up with your own version, that kind of dilutes or eliminates or obviates the original, because when you start doing that, then you start saying, then it makes a lesser impact of what the original is, because you say,
Exactly.
oh, there's also this. Remember, you still love your.
Well, that's why people point to Mithraism and say, oh, that was before Christianity.
Yeah.
No, it came after Christianity.
Yeah.
But yeah, these others did come before Christianity. But that's because they're trying to obfuscate. And this is where the eucatastrophe comes in, Gary Wayne.
Yeah.
Okay? All these other mythologies co-opted. Well, they all didn't co-opt. They all sprang from the original co-option of the original prophecy that there would be a Messiah that would come and he would deliver the people and restore people back to God. And so, because of that, they basically spread all throughout the world, and every mythology you can trace the same core element, and Joseph Campbell did a real good job of showing this. And you can see the same core element in every myth in the world, because God was going to use it, even though it was meant for evil. God says, I'm going to use this for good, so that when the missionaries come, people will say, wait a minute, we recognize that story, that eucatastrophe, that good news, that gospel. That's what eucatastrophe actually means, basically. Is we recognize that in our own religion. Oh, our own myths must have been a prophecy pointing us to this guy Jesus that they're telling us about.
Yeah.
And when you read the book, like I mentioned before, it was a book called Heaven in Their Hearts. He talks about lots of people that the first time they heard a missionary talk about this, they recognize, oh, that was something from our own myths.
Yes.
And then they convert and become Christians.
Yeah.
That's what eucatastrophe means.
And that's what and that's really comes to the verse that the whole world really has access to understanding. It's just in different kinds of ways. There's so they would be without excuse.
Yeah, and he says the heavens proclaim this.
Yeah.
Why? Because the Mazzaroth, all of the stars, that was the story of the redemption, and yet Nimrod said, oh, we got to change that too.
And it's interesting because the proclaim is different from a passive depiction that you have to pursue, interpret, and understand. If you go, well, if I look at it long enough, I'll understand. You have to kind of interest in it. Proclaiming is an announcing that you'd have to ignore the announcing. It's a generating of audio and visual and cognitive information. That's proclaiming is, the pro is to go forth.
Yeah.
And it's going forth at you. So it's not like it's you're like, agnostically going, I'm going through life and I hope I understand that, or there it is. If I investigate it long enough, I'll see it. Proclaiming is different. It's advancing toward you. And if you are not understanding, it's because you've ignored it, not that it's unaccessible to you or inaccessible.
Let's add the ziggurat now into what we're talking about. What do archaeologists say ziggurats were for? They always bring it. Well, yeah, but they always bring it back to the Chaldeans and how they go up. And what did the Chaldeans do? They studied the stars. And they were astrologers and all this. Okay. So if you've got a building that you're creating and also let's bring in all these other buildings, what do they all have in common? They're all lined up for like the solstices and different things like that. And it's like, okay, well, if all these stargazers have gone around the world and they're creating these buildings that are supposed to line up with the celestial events, then that tells you that they were paying attention to what was going on up there. And that also tells you something about Nimrod. If that's the first structure he's trying to build, it tells you that he's not a stupid person. And I think a lot of times people get the idea, oh, Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Oh, he must have been really good at hunting animals. No. Number one, the mighty hunter before the Lord meant he was a mighty hunter basically in front of or against the Lord. So if you're a hunter going in front of somebody, you're going against them.
And it's interesting because, well, I always thought that meant it was almost like the first of its kind. Like,
could be.
And that, so he was the first to attempt to conquer, and there'll be many more after him who will attempt to conquer. Yeah.
And who did he need to hunt? He needed to hunt people so that he could bring them in to enslave them to do his projects that he wanted to be done. Because up until that point, everybody was like, well, we got to do what Noah told us to do, because Noah is the one that is our leader.
Yeah.
You know? And Noah's sons and all that kind of stuff. And he was like, no, we're going to do something completely and utterly different than what Noah said we should do. And that's why we have this testament of the writing between Noah and NIIMROD, and the reason writing started was because the messenger couldn't remember everything that NIIMROD wanted to say to Noah or Utnapishtim, and so he said, give me some clay, and he smashed it down, and he basically drew out pictures so that the messenger would remember, oh yeah, this is all the stuff he wants me to tell Noah when I get there.
You know, another duplication is really interesting because I've never really thought about it, but it almost seems like how was it even possible by an understanding of human ability right now that one man could construct an ark to hold all the I mean, the intricacies of that. I think if we were to look at that, we'd be looking at the same way we looked at the pyramids and that sort of thing. We're like, wow, this was made with such precision, but you had God's influence on how he was to work, this one man, and he made, and it was out of wood, not of mountains, but he was making a salvific. By the way, wood involved in a salvific thing that is allowing life to continue is a really interesting messianic kind of idea. But then you have this, but Noah was able to do that, and then you have the other kinds of things as well. So it's really the pyramids and the supernatural kinds of construction of that stuff.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but somebody told me that the Ark encounter is not completely full scale, that they even had to scale it down a little bit. So like that big massive ark that they built in Kentucky, I think that Noah's Ark was even a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
I don't think it was like a lot bigger, but I think it was like slightly. Like I think theirs is like 98% or something because they don't have the room or whatever.
Yeah, which makes sense.
I could be wrong about that. But and I'm like, okay, well, if Noah's Ark was even just a little bit bigger than that, that thing is huge. Yeah. I drove by it, and you can see it off in the distance when you're driving by, and I really want to go there sometime, but I'm just like, that thing is incredibly massive.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, so if that's how Noah's Ark was made, and he essentially designed it, you know, based off of God's plan, it's like, even if you were just to say, well, he was just a human that made that, and you wanted to take God out of the picture, the guy, he was like Leonardo da Vinci or something. The guy was a genius.
Listen to what you just said there. When you look at it, how could man do that? Okay, if you just do that, then you kind of end up with something incredulous, like that you can't. But listen to the words you use. He followed God's plan. That's where it should begin and end.
That's exactly it.
Followed God's plan. Now, the pun there is blueprint. It is will. It is supernatural. It is a lot of things that have to do with the completion of it. Means that God gave him the ability to complete it. Follow God's plan. So the thing is not he. That has nothing to do with it. The key word is followed. And when you follow, it's transforming. And the transforming part is you're not doing it by your own power. You're doing it by the he. Yeah. You're doing it by so it's really interesting.
Well, and I think...
Or the gods, not the he.
I think another thing too that Gary's talked about in some of his stuff is before the flood, they were building structures in stone, and they weren't sure whether there was going to be a flood or fire. They weren't sure how God was going to destroy everything, and I kind of, with everything that I'm studying, I think they kind of knew that a flood was coming, and I think they didn't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
But I think that's why they buried sites like Göbekli Tepe and things like that, because if a flood comes, you can't knock something down with a wall of water that's already buried.
Yeah.
You know, in
Well,
the dirt.
The thing I like about one of the I don't know theories about Göbekli Tepe is that that it's the Noahic altar.
Oh yeah,
You've seen that one, right? Where
I've seen that, and that makes a lot of sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because when you have all those animals that are depicted there, it's like, yeah, that kind of makes some sense, and it's not that far from Ararat, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But what's interesting is, and they won't let you dig it because of the World Economic Forum, but there are a lot of those tepes. Göbekli is not the only one.
It just sounds like
several of them.
A guy from the 70s. They won't let you dig it.
They
won't let you understand it. Can you dig it? No.
Can you dig it?
No, I can't.
You can't dig Göbekli Tepe anymore. And they won't let you dig the other tepes either, so we're never going to know. But why would they stop us from being able to dig there?
Why? Right.
That's what I want to know. It's like, what is it about that information that they know that they don't want us to know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's like the guy that the pyramid guy, the really, what's his name?
Yeah.
The guy who's stopping all the information.
Oh, Zahi Hawass.
Yes.
Yeah. What is it that he knows that he's not letting anybody else?
Yeah.
And you know, the thing is too, this guy Let Us Reason. He bases a lot of his stuff off of David R.R. And I think David R.R.'s a genius, and he's not a Christian, but he's the guy that they interview in the Exodus documentaries where they Echoes of Time, I think is the name of the. I could be getting it wrong. Anyway, this guy did a documentary about Exodus, and he used R.R.'s chronology to basically find out a pyramid that had a statue of a guy that was wearing a multicolored robe that looked like Joseph, and his sarcophagus was empty, and when everybody else's sarcophagus had bones in it, it's like, well, where did Joseph's bones go? They took them with them back to Israel, you know, or back to Canaan. And so it's kind of like well, and that's the other thing, too. Why did they go to Canaan? Why did God say, I'm giving you Canaan? Because Canaan was cursed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and he was like, no, you're not. You guys can go. And why did all the Nephilim show up in Canaan? Why was it that all the giants were invaded that land? Because if you're trying to defend something, you're going to put all your biggest, strongest, most powerful in the area, and yet God says, okay, Israelites, go on up there and take the land.
Yeah.
You know, it all goes back to that.
There's so many metaphors for that attempt. When God says, "Go," though the task is giant, I will show you how to do it. I mean, that's Noah.
Yeah.
That's a lot of these things. So
Okay. One thing though that Gary did say I want to talk about real quick. Is he talked about how Moses had been initiated into all of the mystery religion stuff. Because if he had grown up, that would have been the way they would have educated him.
Yeah.
And so when he wrote, Gary didn't talk about this, but I got to thinking about it, and I was like, well, that makes sense. So if Moses wrote a lot of the early part of the Bible, the whole early part of the Bible was to refute and basically point to people, look, all this came from this Nimrod guy, and I don't want you following after what they worshipped in Egypt. I don't want you following after what they worshipped in the land of Canaan. I don't want you following what they're worshiping in Mesopotamia. And it's like, it totally all makes perfect sense then, that it's like, well, if Moses really understood, because he was brought up in that culture, then he probably made the connection. Oh, yeah, all that goes right back to this one place, and God wants me to pretty much tell everybody that this is not what's right.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
I know, it's cool. So anyway, people, go to our, if you want to read the Gary Wayne article that I wrote, you can go to hiddencitadel4.wordpress.com and read that and many, many other articles. If you love us, you need to go to redbubble.com and buy some of our t-shirts, like the Yuffie shirt that Greg is wearing right there. And you can go buy our book, the Encyclopedia of Weird Crap Volume 1, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever books are sold. And if you want to go and buy it from your local bookstore and ask them to order it, then there's a chance that maybe they'll start carrying our book in the store. But
awesome.
It is time. It is that special time that we almost neglected. And you know what it is.
Yes,
it's time to pitch Josh Scott a pedal.
That's
Have you thought of one? I think it should be called the NIIMROD.
I was thinking the same thing.
There you go. What would it do?
Well, all right. So the NIIMROD. So I always think of
it would take over your board and subjugate every other pedal.
I think so. I think that's exactly it. I was thinking the same thing.
I got an idea.
It takes over your amp. It's not just a modeler.
Remember how we want to have an expression pedal that controls the different parameters for each pedal, and each pedal can go into expression.
Yeah.
What if the NIIMROD is a pedal that when you plug the expression pedal into it, it sends out an expression line to all the other pedals, and then you can click through so that you can change your expression pedal to control the different Hidden Citadel line of pedals.
To take all those different languages that are dispersed to make them one.
Yeah, and make it into one. So that's how the NIIMROD would work.
Wow.
I went onto Scott's one of their delay pages, and there was one of our early pitches was about a delay pedal.
Yeah.
So I posted it in their the bottom, and I think we just need to start doing that. We need to, whenever we watch their video and they talk about a pedal that's similar to one that we pitched, we need to go and link it so that they can see what we think our version should be like.
We just want to come up with ideas for them.
That's it. We do. We want a Hidden Citadel line of pedals.
That's right.
You know, I think they would be awesome. Just so cool. Anyway, that's the NIIMROD pedal. So, until next time, folks, we hope that you stay in the Citadel.
Because night is coming.
The watchman replies, morning is coming, but night will soon return.